What's up guys, Shawnthebro here. In this episode of converting the 2D and 2.5D fighter to 3D, we are going to be going over the start of 3D hitboxes and hurtboxes. So if we come into our game here and specifically come into practice mode where we can see our hitboxes, we can load up the game and we will spawn in like we always do. We have an AI that is just constantly blocking. We have control over the character on the left here. We are in a 2D fighter, so we can't move in three-dimensional space. Now, I want to execute the cheat that we implemented in the previous episode to switch this to a 3D fighter mode. And this time we are going to replace our 2D hitboxes with our 3D hitboxes. I can also do everything like normal, like move around my opponent. But the main thing here is the hitboxes, the 3D hitboxes. Now, they're not going to register collision properly with our simple hitboxes that we have. So that will be the next step after this. But today's goal is to switch out our 2D with 3D hitboxes whenever we are in our 3D fighter mode. And we can also switch back, by the way. If we disable 3D mode, we go back to our 2D mode with our 2D hitboxes. So if you remember that episode on simple and complex hitboxes, it's all coming together right now. That's what we're going to be covering in this episode. If you want to get caught up in the entire fighting game tutorial series so you can see how we've done things like local multiplayer, online multiplayer, and AI, I'll link you to the entire playlist right here in the top right corner of your screen. Alternatively, if you don't care about those things and you just care about making a 3D fighter, note that this series is working off of our 2D and 2.5D fighter. That series is going to remain that way, but this mini-series is meant to allow you to make a 3D fighter using those episodes. So at the very least, I still recommend that you watch the first episode, all the previous episodes of converting it to a 3D fighter so you can see how we've set up all of our 3D logic so far. With that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. This is a code and blueprint tutorial series. We're going to be doing a pretty good mix of code and blueprints today. And as we've been moving toward more code-only implementations in the fighter and all of our series, you'll note that I'm making things as clean as possible for code conversion, so this logic will definitely eventually be code only and not blueprint, but that will all be converted in the code conversion episodes if you care about that. It won't be required, it'll just be a little nice thing to be able to do this in code. So first things first, let's go to the code. Let's go to our fighter template character.h. Fighter template character is our base character, so all of our characters derive off of this. And this character has hurtboxes attached to it. Typically, they are those 2D simple hurtboxes, but in the 3D fighter now, we have these complex hurtboxes. Now, we had an episode where we already implemented these 3D complex hitboxes and hurtboxes. I'm not making any changes to that logic or to those hurtboxes in today's episode. Instead, what I'm going to do is just make a toggle so that we can actually change between our different hurtbox dimensional types. So I want a function that I can perform this logic in. So I'm going to scroll down in my function list and I'm going to go to my blueprint implementable events because currently in this series the spawn hurtboxes function is a blueprint only function. And for us to actually set those hurtboxes properly, we need to do it in the blueprint. I want to use this blueprint implementable event to reset the hurtboxes and then trigger the new hurtboxes to be spawned. So ufunction blueprint implementable event, this means we can call it in the code, but all the logic resides in the blueprint. The comment here that I wrote says reset the hurtbox complexity by removing all hurtboxes and creating new ones. Technically, we're not going to be creating new ones. We're going to be hiding the old ones and making the new ones visible. So if we're in 2D, we're hiding the 3D ones, making the 2D ones visible, and if we're in 3D, we're hiding the 2D ones and making the 3D ones visible. Function is void reset hurtbox complexity. Since this is a blueprint implementable event, we don't need to fill out any logic for it in the code, so we're good to go there. Once we have that function created, let's go to our fighter template game mode.cpp. Let's scroll down to our cheat that allows us to change between 2D and 3D modes. I've changed a couple things in here. So the very first thing is I moved the isFighterMode3D variable setting above the Team 1 and Team 2 character logic. So previously these lines here, 119 and 120, were at the end of the logic, just within these two brackets. But I moved it up above our for loops where we're doing logic on each character for each team. And that is because I want the characters to know what the fighter mode is when we're resetting their hurtboxes, so we can actually set them to be using the proper hurtboxes. So move that line, and then I added a new line here, which isn't really required, where I'm setting the complex hurtboxes to the should enable boolean. previously in the series, these simple and complex hurt boxes were both working for the 2.5D fighter that we actually have. And that's perfectly fine. If you want to keep using them on there, you can do so. But for our 3D case, I think we should always use complex hurt boxes, because now we're getting into things like depth, attacking individual limbs, and things like that. So I'm going to say that if we are using 3D mode, we are going to enable and disable complex hurt boxes along with this. So basically, is using complex hurt boxes is the same as is fighter mode 3D right now. I'm leaving is using complex hurt boxes as its own variable in case you do want to use simple and complex hurt boxes in just the 2D fighter. But since this is just a cheat that we can use to test between our two modes, 2D and 3D, I think this makes the most logical sense. So I'm setting is using complex hurt boxes to our should enable boolean coming into the function. Below in the for loops for the teams, once we've adjusted their plane constraints and their scale, I want to update their hurtbox complexity. So I'm calling this function on every character. So every character is switching out their 2D or 3D hitboxes and hurtboxes for the other set. So team 1 characters at index I reset hurtbox complexity for the first for loop, and team 2 characters at index I reset hurtbox complexity for the second for loop. So now all characters on every team will have their hurt boxes reset. At this point, we can go into the editor, and we want to go to our base character blueprint, which for me is at blueprints, character BPs, base character BP. And in the event graph, there's a lot going on, but we don't care about any of it today. We just want to add a new event, and it is going to be a reset hurtbox complexity. So right click, reset hurtbox complexity. We're going to use this event, which will get you this node here. And then I've made a new function to hide any existing hurt boxes plus function here, and I called it despawn hurt boxes. Doesn't take any parameters or anything. It's a very simple function. We are going to use the simple hurt box array that exists on the character. This tracks all of the simple hurt boxes that our character has. So simple hurt box array. We get that. We want to loop through every hurt box that the character has on them. And I'm doing two things. So the first thing I'm doing is calling set active and leaving it as false. This will allow us to not update, not tick, not do things that we don't want to do when these hitboxes are visible. And then the other thing I was doing was set visibility. And I was setting that to false so that we could hide them. Additionally, we should actually set the collision to disabled. So that's what we have here. And then on completed of the for loop, I was actually clearing the entire array. So simple hurtbox array clear, just to get rid of all the elements, because when we spawn the hurtboxes, we're going to add them back. When we call the spawn hurtboxes function, which is really just looking at the hurtboxes that exist on the character's mesh, they're going to get added to this array. So if we clear them out now, there won't be duplicates. Additionally, if we change the spawn hurtboxes array to add unique, instead of just add, you won't ever get duplicates. You won't have to clear it here. It's another option for you. After clear, I do the same exact logic for the complex hurtbox array. We're going to loop through them all, set them to be inactive, set them to be invisible, and then clear them once the loop completes. Another thing we probably should do is disable the collision on them, but the collision on them is not actually enabled in spawn hurtboxes. The next episode on the 2D to 3D fighter conversion is going to be going over collisions with our 3D fighter mode, so we can cover that then. It'll be a very simple update to this function. But once we have despawn hurtboxes created, we can go back to the event graph and call this function. So you can drag it in from the function list or simply search for despawn hurtboxes. After calling despawn hurtboxes, I want to call spawn hurtboxes. So spawn hurtboxes is called initially in begin play for the character. So see, this is begin play, and we're initially calling spawn hurtboxes. So it's basically like we're just doing a reset to our hurtboxes. If we go in here, I want to update this logic a little bit as well. So previously in spawn hurtboxes, we were getting the game mode reference and getting our is using complex hurtboxes boolean, putting that into a branch, and then determining the appropriate hurtboxes to use. This is still valid, but I added a little bit extra here, because if we aren't using our cheat to toggle between 2D and 3D fighter modes, we still won't have the proper information is using complex hurt boxes will still be false unless we've arbitrarily set it to true, which means we would still spawn the simple hurt boxes. I added an or statement here, that way we could check if it's complex hurt boxes or if it's fighter mode 3D to then spawn the appropriate hurt boxes. This is very simple because our character BP already has a game instance reference, so we can just get game instance ref, check for our is fighter mode 3D boolean, get it. Then we need an or boolean here, and we want to pass in is using complex hurt boxes and is fighter mode 3D. And then the branch that's already in here, we want to use the result of the or instead, and that's how we get this logic here. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of converting the fighter from 2D and 2.5D to 3D. If you did, please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do, and I really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to my awesome Patreon members, Discord supporters, and YouTube membership supporters. You guys are great. Thank you so much for all the love. I'm very grateful. If you ran into any problems following this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. There's a link in the description. I would be happy to help you. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.